This is Scott Becker with the Becker's Healthcare Podcast. It's my pleasure today to visit with Ankit Jain. Ankit is the founder of a company called Infinitus. He's a brilliant leader. We'll have a wide-ranging discussion about what they do in healthcare, how we started this company, what drove him to be a founder, how he's had success with it, advice for systems and testing different technologies, advice for companies, and a lot more. Ankit, can you take a moment and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Infinitus?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Scott. Once again, my name is Ankit Jain. I'm one of the founders and the CEO of Infinitus. We are a 5-year-old company that is aiming to create time for healthcare. This is my third time founding an entity. I started off my career as an engineer, built a search engine, which ended up being acquired by Google, then went and started a company in the mobile space. Then after that company got acquired, went back to Google to help start Google's AI venture fund. And in 2017, after the Transformers paper came out, I was showing a demo of something that some Google engineers built to automate reservations at spas and salons and restaurants using voice. And my wife turned to me and said, "So you're telling me these brilliant engineers made a machine that can have conversations just like a human, and they decided to make spa reservations? This is so Silicon Valley." And I challenged her and I said, "What would you do with this technology?" And she said, "I would change healthcare. The number of people that spend more than half their day waiting on hold just to get information, whether it's for benefits, eligibility, prior authorizations, claims, statuses, denials, that's just between providers, pharmacies, and payers, or for referrals, or phone calls plague healthcare." And so we started Infinitus to automate those back office phone calls so that all these people that joined healthcare to serve patients could do exactly that. And 5 years in, we've done just over 3 million of these phone calls on behalf of over 80,000 providers around the country.
Ankit, take a moment. You've started several companies. I know you're literally a double graduate from UCal Berkeley in engineering, different types of engineering, master's engineering. Where's the drive found to found companies? Where's that drive come from?
Growing up, I grew up in a household where my mom was the stable breadwinner. She was a managing partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and my dad was starting company after company in the network security space. So a lot of inspiration came from the two of them, of balancing the technology side of my brain and the business side of my brain. But once you take that plunge and you are able to take something from 0 to 1, it's quite addictive. It's quite empowering to say, I can create something from nothing. And the drive to have impact is what drives me. You know, when we talk about the impact we want to have at Infinitus, it's about how many hours, hundreds of hours, thousands of hours, millions of hours we can unlock for healthcare workers so that patients can get on therapy quicker. They can adhere to those therapies because they can afford them. And it's something that makes healthcare about healthcare again, not just about back office paperwork and phone calls.
The phrase 0 to 1, I think famous phrase used maybe in Peter Thiel's book, if I'm correct, or another great founder's books. Talk a little bit about that concept. So we were talking about that yesterday, 0 to 1, and then certain other people are fantastic at growing something once somebody has started it from 1 to 100. Talk about the phrase 0 to 1. I guess a lot of people are familiar with it today, but not everybody is. Talk about that phrase and concept.
Yeah, to me, 0 to 1 is being able to take something vague, take an idea and make it a reality. And what 0 to 1 is for a company changes from day to day. In the first 6 months of the company, it was making sure that we had the right financing, that we had enough talent density in a room. It was 5 of us for the first year or so, that we were able to prove that the craziness of building a machine that could speak for hours at a time could be delivered. So it was proving that you could build a technology. And then as you look at year 2, the 0 to 1, the vague thing that we had never done before, was to convince people to buy this and start using it and make real calls. So you have the technology, now you've got a machine that's making phone calls. Will people talk to a machine? It's a human on the other side talking to our machines. So the 0 to 1 kind of changed there. And as where we are now 5 years in, having a bunch of proof points, a number of customers that are seeing tremendous efficiencies from our services, I'm spending my time thinking about how do I take this from a one product company to a company that can really serve our customers and unlocking even more time. And so there's a constant evolution of what new problem needs to be solved and how we open up opportunities for us, for our customers, for our employees. And to me, that is that 0 to 1 mentality that drives me.
And what are you most focused on and excited about this year? What are you most focused on and excited about as we roll sort of towards the middle of 2024?
Yeah. So, there's 3 things that I'm watching right now as I think about the world of healthcare, the world of AI and technology, because that's the intersection of where I am. I think front and foremost, all the stuff that's happening with Change Healthcare right now, the dominant effects of the outage, it has huge implications on the industry. From our perspective, the hold times when you call the payers have gone up because people aren't able to get some of their data digitally, but that's a small piece of it. But everyone is realizing that single points of failure, no matter how basic building blocks they are not good for the ecosystem. So as we think about the healthcare entities that exist, everyone's going to think about redundancy. Everyone's going to think about how can they make sure that they don't have such a situation that happens again? And we think this is part of the plug and play infrastructure that's very relevant to AI, being able to use whatever modality you need to do to complete a task. As you adopt new technology, how do you make it so it's plug and play? You define your goal, and then the technology does the rest. For us, our customers come to us and say, can you get us the data needed to make sure a patient can get on therapy? They don't really care whether we get it online through a portal, whether we get it through an API, or whether it's through a phone call that we make. And that's the kind of redundancy that they're looking for. That's kind of trend number 1. Trend number 2, and not too many people are talking about this right now, is I predict there to be a little bit of an enterprise AI winter. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. If you go back the last 20, 25 years, there's been a few periods of time when people have found there to be giant AI breakthroughs, and then it's kind of fizzled away. I don't think that's going to happen again. I think we have fundamentally unlocked a new kind of technology that will drive a huge revolution. But every single time this has happened, whether it was the internet, whether it was mobile, whether it was cloud, all the big enterprise buyers were extremely excited by it. And they came up with all kinds of use cases, but the technology wasn't ready for those enterprise use cases, whether it was security, whether it was compliance, whether it was guardrails, whether it was the right use cases being built out. After that initial excitement, there was a little bit of a correction in terms of the actual dollars spent on that new wave. And we're starting to see this a little bit in AI. 2023 was the year where everyone had an AI strategy, and now we're hearing from so many people that the actual spend on AI is not as much as they expected. And that's because people are building. Now, what you're seeing, though, is a set of consumer use cases that are coming to being and really growing. But as those are built out, those enterprise features will be built out. In a couple of years down, you're going to see enterprise applications of AI start blooming again. Again, we saw this on the internet. It took a few years for the enterprise internet offerings to come up and run. In mobile, the first set of success stories were all consumer, and then a few years in, you saw the VPNs and all the enterprise communications come into mobile. Same thing happened in cloud, and I predict the same thing is going to happen in the world of AI.
Thank you. Fascinating to watch. And as you mentioned, it's like with all these new technologies, there's a huge wave of spending. Then it slows a little bit as people try to integrate it and figure it out. And then it becomes very real or not. I think we all assume that AI at some point will become very real, but your point on this technology sort of spend and where it goes through waves, and you called it an AI winter, is I think a fascinating perspective. when there are people trying to pitch an AI enterprise for an entire health system, or entire this, entire that, versus a specific point solution. The other thing that you mentioned versus point solution were single points of failure. And you know, when we saw that, it was discussed broadly in DC the other day. Any broader thoughts around protecting oneself as an entrepreneur, a founder, a leader against single points of failure?
I think it's critical to building any company, whether you're a startup, whether you are a large enterprise, figuring out what your redundancy is or how your vendors make sure they're not at risk because of a lack of redundancy. So with all of our systems, we've got very detailed backup and recovery options, disaster recovery options. Most of our customers ask us in detail about what those are so that we don't fall trapped to some of those. I do think, to the first part of your question, Scott, as we see maturation in this wave of technology, we will see a lot of consolidation. I think last I heard there was something above 10,000 digital health startups that are selling point solutions to various entities across healthcare. I don't think any large enterprise wants that many vendors. Now, it's exciting to see all this innovation, but it's also tiring for a CIO to be thinking about, how am I going to integrate all of these things? Everyone's data schemas are slightly different. Everyone's integration pathways are different. And so I predict, again, in the next few years, we see pretty large consolidation, and a few companies are able to thematically own certain areas and become the de facto solution providers across a suite of solutions to each healthcare entity.
And this is a very important point, because we all know of stories and so many examples where people could build the most brilliant point solution. And what we have found in the market is, ultimately, even if it's the most perfect point solution, it almost has to be so perfect, because, as you said, most systems don't want to be running more than 1,000, 1,200 applications to go with 5 to 10 enterprise systems. And so nobody wants 12,000 point solutions, even if it's the most brilliant thing, because it's just unmanageable. And so you've seen the venture capital world, you've seen the custom world move away from somebody's brilliant point solution to solutions that come with more breadth and depth and a greater, as you say, a suite. And it's really fascinating, because it really differentiates companies, because there are so many brilliant people out there that could build a brilliant point solution where they're really focused, and it's better than anything else for that point solution. You know, far better than Epic's offering in it, far better than lots of other offerings in it. But the great challenge is hitting this middle spot where you still got complete excellence, but you're in a broader category, not just in one solution. I mean, isn't that fascinating how that works? I find it fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right, but this has been true for enterprise software for decades. The incumbent, the person with the company with the distribution, is able to outmaneuver an innovator just by a press release and a 60% as good solution, because it's that much easier to adopt. It's that much easier to not have to do a new master services agreement, a new procurement, more vendor risk assessments. Your security your surface area is not increased. And so I think, as companies and entrepreneurs and startups really think about it, it's important to start off with differentiation, but then start figuring out, why would a large enterprise add complexity to their surface area, and how do you convince them to do that?
I think that's exactly right. And so talk about, Ankit, you've had this great career as an entrepreneur, brilliant person, family, half entrepreneurial, half somebody who just made sure that the bills were paid. Fantastic. What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs, other founders?
There's so many things, and everyone has to go through their own journey. I saw my dad work incredibly hard, while my mom also worked hard, but supported us in a different way. As I've gone through this journey, my wife, her family, my family have all pitched in just so that I can follow my dreams in startup land. I think as a healthcare entrepreneur, I think it's important to accept that healthcare isn't the easiest place to affect change, but it's important to have the grit if you truly believe in it and have the passion to change it. I think this is something I tell every person who joins our team, which is healthcare isn't for the faint of heart, but if you really care about it, you will be more satisfied than any other industry. The second thing is it's easy to give up when things seem hard, when you don't get a deal or you're not even able to get the meeting with the right person. But if you stick around long enough, and I'm not anywhere near long enough, just about 5 years into healthcare, I think in most cases it's a question of when, not if. Most people have the right ideas, and most people in healthcare across every part of it, whether you're the payers, the providers, manufacturers, pharmacies, everyone wants to do right by the patient because all of us are patients ourselves. So at the end of the day, while it might seem at a very surface level that we're negotiating or pushing back in different ways, we want to do right because we know it's going to come back and affect us directly. And that really moves healthcare forward, sometimes slower than most of us would like, but it moves it forward because everyone's intentions are aligned. And on the AI side, I think it's important for healthcare leaders to balance the wanting to innovate with the wanting to have business impact. While I'm running an AI first company, I want us and all of our customers to be thinking about the impact we'll have, not about how it's done. Someone shouldn't buy our services because it's an AI service. They should buy our services because we can create time for them, because we can unlock people to support more patients. Because 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that's what's going to endure. And I think as an entrepreneur, it's important to focus on those North Star metrics that actually make the difference in the long term.
Let me ask you one other question. What advice for CIOs, for health systems in acquiring technology, evaluating technology, what advice do you give to them?
I think for someone acquiring technology, having the ability to experiment fast, to fail fast, and try more things is the most important thing a leader can enable. We do this internally with our science and research teams. Failure is seen as something that is a mark of future success because we know we will learn from that and move forward. I see one thing over and over again in healthcare. You see these solutions or these companies that build hype extremely fast, and when they fail, and that's happened multiple times in the last 5 years, it almost sucks the wind out of the room, and it takes that risk-taking posture out, or that the wanting to take risk out. I think it's important to experiment quickly and quietly if people are worried about what a fallout would look like, rather than do a lot of marketing before you see success. And so balancing the publicity and balancing success is something, it's a hard thing to do, but I think it's very important for everyone in the world to do.
But it's very important, internal and external. For example, we came to the conclusion that in trying new technologies internally, quite frankly, trying new people internally, trying all kinds of things internally, all of them are a work in process and take time to evaluate. And if you oversell, we're bringing in this new technology, it's going to be great. We're bringing in this new technology, it's going to be great. You run the risk, when it doesn't turn out as great as it expected, that your team and people and system have lost confidence in you. And so this concept of constantly, these are all work in process, we're all working through them, and we're going to try and figure it out. It doesn't mean that we're not going to give it 100%. And it doesn't mean that there aren't some huge bets that are hundreds of millions of dollars, like an Epic system, that you better make work. But I think your point on not overhyping early is so important. I think that just is a great point.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of Amazon's leadership principles comes to mind, which is be right often, right? It's not about being right always, but you want to be right often, and you want to be able to take those risks and minimize your failures, but have the psychological safety to have some failures.
Ankit, I want to thank you for joining us. Could you just, for a moment, tell our listeners where they can find out more about Ankit Jain, about Infinitus?
So I would love to have folks learn more about us on LinkedIn. or on our website at www.infinitus.ai, infinitus.ai.
And so I'm going to correct myself, Infinitus, not Infinitus. Ankit, thank you so much for joining us today on the Becker's Healthcare and Becker Private Equity Podcast. What a pleasure to visit with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.